My name is Ian and welcome to Planted. In this video I'm going to share with you the trials and tribulations of growing figs. I started growing figs back in 2015. I did have some setbacks, but I finally got to a position where I can reliably go out and pick my own fresh figs. And when you can do that, it is a wonderful, wonderful treat. Let's go. So I'm going to share with you everything I've learned about growing figs over the last few years in an attempt to help you have more success. Now, the first thing for you to bear in mind is that growing a fig doesn't mean that you're going to be harvesting figs. You can go out to any one of a number of stores, buy a fig plant that they have in stock, plant it in the ground, and it will grow for you. Just because it's growing doesn't mean it's going to have figs. So you need to choose varieties that will ripen in your climate. And that is where I got it wrong to start out with. I went out and bought a whole bunch of different figs, 5 or 6. Their descriptions sound wonderful, their flavor profile. It was something I was very excited about. But you have to match the ripening capabilities of your plant with the weather that you're going to get. And we get a nice warm summer here in Connecticut in June, July and August. It's great. But it's September and October when these figs can really start to ripen. But by then, the sunlight is dropping, the intensity is lower, and you'll get a crop of green figs that will never ripen. So you have to understand that growing a fig tree and picking fresh figs are two very, very different things. All of my early purchases have gone. They didn't do what I wanted, so I had to choose better varieties to work in my location. Now, when it comes to siting a fig, you want to give it plenty of space. If you can put it up against a wall, maybe 2 feet away from a wall, preferably a brick wall is even better, because that will radiate heat and store heat and help the wood ripen, which will help the plant mature, which will then help it grow fruit for you. So it needs to be on a south-facing wall here in the northern hemisphere. And if you can place it in a southwestern location, that means it can get late summer sun, which will help it ripen. If you've got trees on the western side, they would block the sunshine and you might only get midday sunshine. So these are things that will really help your figs ripen and grow fruit for you. Now, when you've got your tree in a full sun setting, it's going to start growing really well and you'll be tempted to water it and feed it. Both of those things can be done to a minimum. These plants come from the Middle East and the Mediterranean. It's a very dry, very hot, arid environment, and they thrive in it. And that stress and strain makes the flavor even stronger, makes the flavor even sweeter. So if you baby your plant, give it copious amounts of water and lots of fertilizer, the plant's got no reason to put out beautiful fruit. So site it well and treat it mean, and then it can respond. Now, there's a website I went to early on. It's called ourfigs.com. And this is a wonderful site. It's people all over the country, in fact all over the world, that have got varieties that have grown well for them. And they want to share their knowledge. And that's where I got cuttings. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. The varieties that I've had success with, that I am listing as I'm speaking with you, are figs that I did not go into a store and buy. I bought a few mail order over eBay, they were rooted, and then I started on ourfigs.com and I started trading for cuttings. You buy one nice plant and then that will give you 5 or 6 cuttings the next year, and then you trade those for more cuttings. So I cannot say enough about the success of ourfigs.com. You will find people there that have got these figs, that are growing them and are eating them, and that way you know it's a variety that will grow in your area. Now, there are some disorders that you'll have to bear in mind. Dieback is when you don't prune it and the cold winter comes along, desiccate the stems, and what was once a beautiful large crown of a fig tree is now got a bunch of dead stems with only a few small green shoots low down. Don't worry about it, prune out the dead, let the green and the new growth regenerate and your plant will be just fine. It's a little bit unsightly, but it is no big deal. Next we've got squirrels. They will happily come along and try and eat figs that are not truly ripe, and you'll have a half-eaten fruit hanging on the tree, and then that'll also bring in birds. Birds tend to peck at one and then they'll move on to another and then move on to another. Squirrels, I found, tend to climb up onto a branch, sit there, and will start munching away. Sometimes you can't tell the damage. I think either of them make the fruit unusable. And then you've got the remarkably misconceived fig mosaic virus. This is a mottling of the foliage. In some strains of figs it's very prevalent. There's a plant called, a fig called Black Madeira. Beautiful fig, well worth having, but the fig mosaic virus has really turned that upside down. It's a very weak plant, it doesn't grow well. There are some strains that have been cleaned up and they're well worth finding to you, but Black Madeira needs nice hot warm climate, so I'm not going to try and grow it here. So squirrels, birds, dieback and fig mosaic virus. Those are four of the most common things that you will have to look out for. Overwintering your fig, you can have it in a pot and bring it into a conservatory or a basement, and that will mean that it won't freeze. You do want it to go dormant, and you can pretty much guarantee that it'll come through the winter. If you leave it outside, you could put it into a garden shed. That would prevent it from getting desiccated from strong cold winds, but obviously it will probably freeze in there unless you have a heater. What I've done is I found that my figs are by far the most productive when they're planted in the ground. They've had 2 or 3 years in the ground to put out a big root system, and what I do is I prune them back to 12 or 18 inches, put a layer of leaves over them, a layer of Tyvek, the house rat, another layer of leaves, and that keeps the crown nice and warm, essentially frost free, and also the strong winds can't desiccate the crown. And the next spring it'll come back beautifully and grow ever so well. Now, if you've got a fig that is really good and you don't want to prune it back so hard, you can add a barrel, or you can put in some canes and add a windproof layer around it. Now, I've done a video on this, there'll be a link in the description. I have to impress upon you, do not wrap it in plastic, because the heat will spike in there and then it will get a lot of moisture and condensation, and then you'll get all sorts of bugs and bacteria growing in this very hot, cold environment, and ultimately your plant can fail. So although you want to wrap it, you do want to let it vent. When you start to actually pick figs, the temptation is, oh, it's soft, it must be ready, I'm going to pick it right now before the birds and squirrels get it. But what you want is that fig to be the texture of marshmallow, very soft, very squishy. And the fruit will actually hang down. There's a little stem, and you'll see the fruit kind of hanging on the side. As it gets heavier and it starts to swell up with moisture, it'll hang down and it'll have this soft marshmallow texture. That's when you know it's ripe. I cannot impress upon you enough, do not pick it prematurely. Even a day will change the flavor profile and make it 10 times more delicious, and you wish you'd left it on the plant. But your chances are you'll have to pick a few early to know that it's not as tasty as it could be. And if ever anybody's picked a fresh fig and then they've been kind of, it was all right, I can almost guarantee it was picked too soon and it did not have that full flavor. You do need to be patient with figs. Don't be in a rush to go and get 5 or 6 nice choice varieties this winter, which is a time when dormant cuttings are available. Have success putting them in pots, get them growing, and think that next year you're eating figs, because that's just not the way it's going to work. You need to have your fig in the ground for a few years and gradually build up the right plant, the right variety in the right location, and then also practice having it come through the winter. And the final thing I want to say about figs is that you should get 4, 5, maybe 6 varieties, plant them in southwest facing locations where you've got space. And what this means is that at any one season, you'll have 3 or 4 figs that will be fruiting for you, enough to give you a good crop. I had a fig last year called Olympia that put on 70 figs. They were beautiful, they were ripe, and I got them in late August and going into September. Perfect time of year. This last winter it was very, very cold, and this year the crop was very, very late or delayed. And I do want you to understand that there's a main crop, there's a Breba crop, which is the early crop. And if we get late frosts, it's that Breba crop that can get zapped, won't set, and then you'll have to wait for the main crop. So there's lots of anomalies and uniqueness when it comes to growing figs, and having multiple plants will give you the confidence that some of those plants will grow for you very, very well. Now finally, everything I referred to is a common fig. These do not need fertilization at all. You plant them, they will set fruit, which is essentially an inverted flower, and that's what we eat. In California, and I think also in some parts of Texas and down south, there's a wasp fig, it's called Blastophaga, and that fig does in fact pollinate them, and it is said that they change the shape of the fruit, the flavor of the fruit, and even the color of the fruit. We don't have that, so I'm not talking about any figs that need to be pollinated with the fig wasp. These are just common figs. So that's it. Get the right variety, plant it in the right location, be patient, get multiple varieties, don't over water it, don't overfeed it, and make sure you wrap it in the winter. And before you know it, you can be eating fresh figs. Thanks for watching.